Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com for all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and anything interesting that falls between. This is podcast episode 162, and we are covering season 4, episode 411, If Not for Hope. It was directed by Mairzee Almas and written by Bronwyn, Garrity and Shaina Fewell. Hello. Welcome, welcome. It took me a little time this week to get to this podcast. I had to wrap my head around the whole thing, and it took me really some time to stew, so to speak. I think because parts of it flowed beautifully and other parts felt a little clunky. So I wasn't quite sure really what to make of the whole episode. And the summary goes something like this. Roger is recaptured. Brianna uses art therapy. Brianna sketches a beautiful woman. Jocasta plans a party. Jamie, Claire, and young Ian are on the trail. There is worry for Brianna. Young Ian plays marriage therapist. Fergus finds intel, but not work. Jocasta bears a gift. Marsali knows what a man needs. The eligible men arrive. Brianna commands a parlor game. A pirate is captured. A proposal will be made. Brianna hatches a plan. Bones are discovered. Jamie and Claire make up. Roger is put to a test. This episode brims over with emotional vulnerability and characters being unable to hide who they are, what they are, and exist almost in bareness for viewers to watch. The overarching theme of hope, which, yes, the title is If Not for Hope, but it was said multiple times during the episode, especially toward the end. But it was a bit over the top and really lacked any subtlety, as if we couldn't figure out all these hopeless situations that were going on. And then all of a sudden, toward the end, there was hope. I mean, it's a little spoon-fed. And that has been one thing this season that some of the writing team have done. It's like we can't pick it up for ourselves without it being so yin and yang, so obvious that they're playing hopelessness off of hope. Okay. The adapted material, or rather, the material being adapted from, is very smart. Sometimes too wordy, sometimes too detailed. Sometimes there's ancillary things in it that could have been edited out or trimmed down, sure. But the material is often very, very smart. It is rare to find an Outlander book reader that is not an avid reader and somebody who pretty well critically thinks. I'm sure we'll find some, but that's not the norm. And I'm afraid the TV show sometimes dumbs down the material, and they think people aren't going to understand what they're trying to get to. Well-written television really doesn't have to be explained. It doesn't have to be obvious. You will still get it. Even if you don't notice every detail or understand every sub-theme or whatever, you will really get the driving force of what they're trying to say to you. So I was kind of thinking this episode was a bit of a mixed bag with that. And yeah, you don't need to knock me on the head Hope, hope, hope. Okay, we get it. It's in the title of the episode. Like, that could have been enough. It didn't actually have to be used in the episode as a word, as something that the characters were saying. But that said, we did see a transition from the beginning of the episode where Jamie and Claire weren't getting along, Roger was recaptured, Brianna was using art therapy. She was drawing really gritty and raw images of the pain that she was in. And not knowing where Roger is, knowing her aunt wants to marry her off because she was handfast without witnesses, etc. There's a lot of hopelessness in the beginning of the episode, all the way around. And it even filtered into Fergus because he can't find a job. I'll go into more detail about all this stuff. But that was really the predominant feel to the first part. I don't want to go to a party. I don't want a new dress. I just want to be by myself. That was Brianna. I mean, she was not quite sulking, and she was very aware of what she was doing and why, but that was really what her attitude was. And then as we transition to the second half of the episode, Claire and Jamie make up, and Brianna has a plan and figures out what to do, even though the plan itself backfires to a degree or doesn't hash out immediately. In the end, it sort of hashes out to her benefit, right? And we see that Roger is in Mohawk Village, and he feels like, okay, he kind of had to go through a gauntlet, and he felt really hopeful until he got punched in the face. That was a brilliant way to end the episode, really, though. Because he's there, he's alive, he's basically well. Okay. So, what am I looking at this episode? Like, Brianna, the prized heifer, I mean, that is really what she was. Not only is she fertile, because she's obviously producing a baby, Jocasta was trying to maneuver things so somebody of wealth or station, or wealth and station, would marry her, so that would create an alliance between two families. Old school politics. It was proven that Brianna's fertile, right? That was important in them days. Still important in lots of the world. And she's really put on display, uncomfortably put on display. And there's some granny lust in there too. So that's what Aunt Jocasta is seeing her as this prized beast. And frankly, she's an heir. The baby's an heir to Jocasta. This is her blood family. So this is a really big deal to Jocasta, much more than what we see on the surface. So the first line I have is salivating single men, mostly. That's where granny lust comes in here, because Judge Alderdice's mother comes with him. Even then, it was a little suspicious for 40-year-old men who have prominent positions to be single and living with their mother. Yeah. So though he wasn't salivating over Brianna, he's a very kind man, his mother really was, right? And then we have Lieutenant Wolfe, and we have Gerald Forbes. Okay. And, you know, they're really trying to vie for her and one-up each other, and it's almost comedic at one point. And as, it feels like the men were trying to outdo each other in conversation, and Forbes brings this box of gems, and Wolf is really annoyed by that because, oh, look at me, I'm wealthy, I'm Forbes, right? I can give you things. And then, after Forbes thinks he totally has the upper hand before dinner, because they're waiting on one final guest, right? Lord John Grey comes in elegant and beautiful, because he's beautiful. I love him. I love book version. I love TV version. I love Lord John Grey. I wouldn't want to be married to him, because he wouldn't like me that way, but I would totally be his bestie. Yep. And I probably would try to get him to, like, kiss me on occasion. Totally would. Anyway, so he comes in, and Jocasta thinks it's because Brianna's eligible, right? But no, that's not really why he's there, but we'll get to that in a minute. So it's a very, suspicious that it's eligible men at this dinner with a sister and a mom in tow. Like, it's men. Okay. Like, Brianna's like, huh. Because her aunt doesn't come out and tell her this is her coming out. And now can be asked to be married to one of these men. Like, she doesn't know that. She's kind of putting it all together. She thinks she's just going to be introduced to people in society. No, this is a small, intimate party. Jocasta is persuasive. Brianna had turned down the new dress and instead decided to sketch Phaedra because she is beautiful. And so Brianna had a dress that Jocasta insisted she have that Phaedra actually changed from one of Jocasta's old gowns. But Jocasta's persuasiveness is very Mackenzie. I mean, she's got a plan. She's thinking 10 steps ahead, and she's relentless. So she brings Brianna some earrings that are going to match the dress that she's having remade. And she tells her a story about Ellen before she married Jamie's father, Brian. And Ellen was pregnant. And Dougal was going to try and get her married off, but she but she snuck out and married Brian. And then we know the rest of the history of his parents. So she's trying to warm Brianna up, like, hey, well, your grandmother was pregnant when she got married too. Wink, wink. And she somehow, with her silken voice and the way she would talk to her, like Jamie talking to horses, convinces Brianna that she does want to go to the dinner party and she will wear the dress and the earrings. And Brianna, doesn't really see it coming. As my husband says, age and treachery. And during this dinner party, there's the usual conversations going on. And then Brianna brings up a game of psychology. She's going to have you close your eyes. You're in a forest. You think of the person who should be there with you. And what animal do you see, right? Then she's going to explain what your thoughts mean, what you see, what it means. And so she picks on alder dice, and John kind of picked up on a hint. Gaydar, maybe. I do think that's a thing. I think people know. Some people are very sensitive to other people's sexual attraction, sexual preferences. And in that time, gosh, even now sometimes, and in some parts of the world, you have to really repress that. And you can't give out obvious signals. It's not like in the U.S. where there can be very extravagant gay men. Like in other parts of the world, that can still get somebody killed. Or kind of butch lesbians. Like, we can have that here. You can have what you want. Or you can have feminine lesbians. And you could have, like, gay men who you would never know that they were gay based on anything that they do or wear or say. They keep it to themselves. I mean, so you can have the whole spectrum here. And it's all okay, right? But in that time, you really couldn't have that be obvious. The tells had to be very, very, very small. But how Brianna interpreted what Alderdice saw, yeah, there was something more to it. And at the end of this game, and everybody's kind of talking because Alderdice decides to exit. He needs some air. And she asks John who he saw, and he saw Jamie. And she's like, oh, why? And he's like, well, you're sitting right in front of me. And, he covers his tracks really well. Your dad sent me to look in on you. He didn't tell me anything, but I'm here to check in and make sure that you're okay. So he was able to slip that in to kind of divert her attention and to make it so it wasn't weird. He was thinking about her dad. But then in order to get out of an invitation, she decides to swoon. Like, the whole parlor game really reminds me of Claire in season 2. And the swooning she definitely got from her mother. So she swoons in order to get out of an invitation to go walking with Forbes, because she knows where this is going. It's interesting because you can meet somebody and a match is just made. Like, Jocasta wants to close a freaking deal. She wants her married. She wants the baby to have a name, not be a bastard, because in that time it could follow them around. Heck, it followed kids around when I was young. I mean, I'm 51, and I remember there being a stigma. I never cared about any of those things. Whatever. My family were some of the only divorced parents I knew well into the 80s. So that was really fun. So she's really using all the resources that she has. And after she swoons, they take her into another room, a salon, sitting area. And Lizzie comes in and, of course, spills the beans. But I put that under a different section, so I'll come back to that. But Lord John comes in and talks to her, and there's a friendship beginning to form between the two of them. Now, obviously, John is going to be really interested in her because she's Jamie's and Claire's daughter. I mean, how could he not be? And also, she feels very comfortable with him for some reason. He feels like a safe place, and she divulges things to him rather simply, and this is where that bareness and that emotional vulnerability comes from. And he responds to that, and he's more open with her as well as time goes during this visit at River Run. And he hands her a letter from Jamie, but she doesn't open it. And he assures her he doesn't know details. He was just sent to look in on her, make sure everything was fine. And so he did. He's my friend. I'm going to go check in on his kid and see what's happening. But they really start to have somewhat intimate conversation, which she really wouldn't have with anybody. Maybe she would talk to Roger that way, or her mother, but not general people. She wouldn't. And from here, when he exits and goes to bed, she has to speak to her aunt alone. And this is where Brianna totally figures out that she's on the marriage block. She's being paraded out to get married to one of these men. And why, and the importance of it. She doesn't want to get married. And Jocasta has some pretty brutal words for her. Like that Roger's not coming back and it doesn't really matter because the Indians have him and that's that. And Brianna can't really accept that at all. It's not sitting with her well. But she also listens to her Aunt Jocasta, ultimately. She does, because she knows she has to create the best environment for this baby. And if Roger comes back, she could, I think we didn't see this, but I think in her mind that she could break an engagement because she said, oh, my husband's back, that kind of thing. And the last part of Brianna is an offer he couldn't refuse. Now, everything connected to an offer he can't refuse is challenging. Brianna could not sleep. She was thinking about that letter that she didn't read. She put it back down. She was thinking about Roger. So she got up to get a snack. Everybody in the house is sleeping. She goes and gets something and she hears a noise. She hears noises. And, she's just in her night shift. And she kind of goes through this room and it's supposed to be the slave's corridor. So it's a space that most guests, though the house is full of guests, most guests would not ever go in there. And everybody was sleeping. But she hears these noises and she goes in and she peers around a corner and she sees Lord John and Judge Alderdice engaged in sex. So there you have it. Now, this is a really hot topic. This has been something that people have been really annoyed. The aggravation for me in this is that it was so easy for her to stumble on them and hear them. I don't care that it was slave corridor. I don't care that everybody was sleeping. It seems like it was such an obvious move by the writers. And there could have been a more creative way. And it's not, I don't care about gay sex. Sex is sex on TV, whatever, I don't care. But it's the fact that both of these men have high positions and to be so easily found. If she could hear them across through a room while she's just walking in the hall, anybody could have gotten up who were guests and going to get a snack. Any of them. So to me, it's really tricky because I really think it lacked the privacy that would have been there. If that little cove area would have had a door and she kind of looked through the slats of the door, if she had to go and see it instead of just kind of stumbling upon them in this really not private space, that would have served better. I'm really thankful that they had somebody who had the same station as Lord John and was not one of the servants. Because even at that time, that was very unequal. And even though Lord John wouldn't expect it, the slave could not have said no to him if he wanted to have sex. So, and I don't think Lord John saw it that way. He just saw two consenting people. He's not that self-effacing yet. He doesn't see that part. He is very British. And even though He tries not to have excessive white privilege. He's a great man, but he still does. And he combats that in his character. So that's the only element of that scene that really bothers me, is the fact that she so easily stumbled upon them. That's all. And yes, she needed to definitively know that Lord John was gay, right? Poor Judge Alderdice, he just got taken along for the ride. And it's something that if you read the books, you know that Lord John has discreet relationships. So this felt very indiscreet to me, even though we're supposed to suspend disbelief that Brianna found them so easily without any trouble because she heard them. So anyway, I'm going to get off that topic. But the next step in this is the next morning, or later that morning, because this is middle of the night, Brianna learns that Forbes is going to propose to her. Like, Jocasta's approved it, it's going to happen. And so Brianna hatches a plan. She has Phaedra stall her aunt for like an hour to tell her I was out walking already. And she has Lizzie go tell Lord John to meet her out on the other side of the garden where they can talk. And the first thing she does is she, just like her mother, kind of storms into the conversation with asking him to marry her. And she doesn't know that he loves her father, that he's attracted to him at this point, even though she does know now that he's gay. And her plan is, well, I can marry John and he's not going to want me to have sex with him because he's gay, right? That's what she's thinking. It's fine. It'll be a win-win for both of us. No problem. But John's like, I can't do that. No, I can't marry you for lots of reasons. And then she goes to feebly blackmail him. I will write letters and do this. I think it's just panic mode. It's obnoxious, but it's just panic mode. And she doesn't know what to do because he's just like screwed up her plan. And that's the only plan she had because Forbes is going to propose. And so they end up having this really wonderful conversation. And he does disclose that Claire knows about him, that Jamie knows. I mean, he gets irritated with her because of her demand and wanting to blackmail him. But then it takes this turn where they really bond and they talk. And he does agree that she needs to be married. This is a situation that is very difficult that she finds herself in. And she backs down and she understands why he can't marry her. And even though he did assure her that he's been married and he knows he can be fine in the marriage bed. He can do the job. She's shocked that he wants to with women. Then she's like, okay, I can't marry you. They didn't go into detail about that, but yeah. The plan is that she doesn't want to sleep with anyone because of Roger. So ultimately, after this really touching bonding conversation, she decides she's going to buck up. She's going to pull up her big girl panties and put on her boots, and she's going to go, all proverbially, mind you, she's going to go to the tea that her aunt has arranged, and she's going to accept Forbes' proposal because it's for the best for her baby. I mean, that's a big deal for her to actually be able to come to that conclusion. So we see this real rawness of her. We see her just all the things that she's going through. We see it right there. And we actually get to see those emotions. And she can't contain them anymore. So she goes into the house fully expecting to say yes to Forbes when behind her, just as Forbes is going to propose, John sweeps in. Have you told them our news? That's not exactly what he said. But he swoops in and says they're engaged. So he comes in like Superman and totally saves the day. Because they can be engaged and not married while they're waiting for Jamie and Claire to return with Roger, hopefully. So he's got a plan too. He just didn't share it with her yet. Jocasta is over the moon. Forbes is super gracious, but yet very disappointed. And Jocasta thinks that Brianna is a true Mackenzie for this maneuver because she really thinks they're getting married. So the only person we really didn't get to see that kind of vulnerability in and is Jocasta. We got to see it on Phaedra, who was embarrassed when Brianna wanted to paint her. We got to see it in John's sharing information with Brianna and just being super open. Like they're both bearing themselves. Not really usual for either of them, but he feels he can trust her as well. They both found a friend, and it was this immediate connection. So the next thing I have is Lord John. His presence, his friendship, his encounter, which we just covered, and bonding with Brianna. So his presence there meant one thing to Jocasta, meant another thing to Jamie, and ultimately meant something else to Brianna. And this is a good man. He is honorable. And we see them have further discussions, and he tells her about his son, who's his stepson, but he loves him like he's his own. And they really get to even deepen what they have. And they're creating something that's totally their own. Sort of like John and Claire creating a friendship of their own when he was sick with the measles. So his presence has softened her aunt, has bought her time, is giving her a person that she can be almost 100% honest with the exception of traveling through time at this juncture. So she's really found somebody that she can take the facade off and she can peel back the layers, and he can too. It's quite lovely. And his friendship means more than just to Brianna. His friendship also means something to Jamie, even though Jamie's not there and he's going to be gone for a couple more months or more, is that this is really the heart of his loyalty and his honor to simply go. Leave his son in Virginia and travel to North Carolina because Jamie asked him to. That's like best friend thing there. Totally. And another aspect to his encounter with Alderdice is the fact that it's very difficult for people in that time who didn't fit the expected behavior that he's going to have sexual needs too. And whether or not they're deep, meaningful encounters or a physical need and just simply being touched, that's really, really important. And when I went through a divorce way back when, I, for the first time in my life, really totally lived on my own, I struggled. I struggled without the option of being hugged and my hand held and just being kissed and being in proximity to another body. It was so difficult. I mean, to the point where my neighbor that moved in next to me, we lived in this little duplex, like I would go knock on her door and she would hug me. She would give me these awesome bear hugs. She would just hug me because I had nobody to touch me. And that was probably that physical starvation. It wasn't just the sex part, which, you know, when you discover how much you like sex, it's very difficult, right? When all of a sudden you're in a desert. But it was the physical connection and the nurturing and the physical, just basic intimacy of sharing space with somebody that would touch you kindly, touch you lovingly. And so I did. That's what I did. And so when I think of how hard it would be in the 18th century for gay men or lesbian women to have that physical companionship, just to have somebody touch you and love you, regardless of the sex. I mean, he has to go without a lot. I mean, that craving for other people and for someone who knows you and understands you and wants to be around you. That is profound for humans. You know, I always laugh and tell my clients, you know, skin to skin is not just for babies. It isn't just for babies. I mean, really just like spooning, whether you're a big spoon or a little spoon, and getting that whole body coverage. That it just gave me endorphins even saying it. Like I got some oxytocin just sharing it. That's what Lord John, that's what Judge Alderdice, that's what any person who lived at that time, even into the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, in some countries, never, still, it has to be totally cloistered. They have to get married and produce children so they can live in society. But what they really need, they can't hardly ever have. So that encounter, really, they were they were clothed. I mean, this wasn't like they were in a naked, passionate embrace, right? They weren't even getting to really touch each other. This was just pure physical release and opportunity that showed up, and they were attracted to each other. I mean, that is huge. So I see this as something very tender to me, that he would have to settle. Either of them would have to settle for a wham bam thank you ma'am, simply for that physical release and to feel like they can be seen. Somebody can know them. Somebody understands them. But the rest of it still had to be missing because of time and circumstances. So it just, it kind of like makes my heart squish a little, makes me squeeze to think about how difficult it must have been, and just living in that desert, that intimacy desert, so much. Unless they were going to, I don't know, it wasn't easy to hide. Sure, there were like men's clubs or places that they could go and interact, but it could have been found out at any time. And somebody could blackmail you. It's really scary. So that encounter to me had way more layers to it than simply Brianna figuring it out and then hatching a plan and, not very well trying to blackmail him. Because she doesn't care that he's a gay man. It's all the other things that go with it, right? It doesn't rile her. She's a modern person, but there's that. So my heart just really goes out to Lord John and those who are in similar circumstances in real life. And the bonding for Brianna, I mean, how special must that have been for Lord John, who has been a friend to Jamie for so long once they worked out their problems and is raising Jamie's other child. And to see the other half of his son in this young woman, I mean, that's pretty amazing. And it's going to give him just that one more connection to the Frasers, one more, how many degrees of separation now? Not very many, but now he's really has relationships with each of them. And I think that's really fabulous and wonderful. And if you can't tell, I love Lord John. He's absolutely my favorite secondary character. To me, he's not secondary at all, but he's my favorite one. I love him. I actually squealed and clapped and said, Lord John, when he was coming out the door. Okay, so we got to talk a little bit about Roger. So what's up with him? Well, in the beginning of the episode, he daydreams of a hot shower. Like Clara loves a hot bath. And it kind of, tried to psych everybody out. And I guess that's called a cold opening, someone said, when it's not the reality. But so he's in a shower, and then he cleans the fog off the mirror, and there's one of the Mohawk behind him. And then he comes back to. So he'd been bathing in the river, and the Indian, or the Mohawk, gives him his clothes and says, don't run away again, or don't try and escape again, that kind of thing. No, he didn't travel back to the future. He decided to stay. What we didn't get to see, though, is his decision-making process. Now, because they found him bathing, that tells me that he made the decision consciously not to go back and to stay because he planned to escape and go and find Brianna. That's what that says to me. But we didn't see it. So we really, with Brianna and River Run, we really got the whole meal. We got meat and potatoes and vegetables and dessert, right? We got all of it and some adult beverages. So we got the whole thing. But we didn't see Roger very much. So we got a little snippet of him. Okay. He's alive, he's recaptured, and he's dreaming about a hot shower. Yeah, I would be too if I had to bathe in one of them cold rivers. And then we see him getting to the Mohawk village and being brutally tested by the Mohawk villagers immediately upon arrival. His hands are loosened, and he's put through, the worst dance-off line you've ever been in. I remember watching, Soul Train and American Bandstand sometimes when I was growing up in the 70s, and they would have the dance lines, people facing each other each side, and then somebody would dance down the middle, and everybody would cheer, and they'd try to outdo each other. Well, that's really what this reminded me of in the worst way possible. All of a sudden, the villagers all line up, and they're throwing stuff at him, they're punching him, they're pushing him down. They're doing all these incredible things to him. And they're trying to test his bravery. Can he handle it? And so he gets knocked down onto his face, and they think he's down, which means, I don't know what they're going to do, but they have killed him. And so he starts to get up, and he gets his wits about him, And they seem really excited. And he's like, yeah, I did it. Like, he's all proud of himself. And then someone comes and punches him in the face. I think it was a right hook. Yeah, it was a right hook. And knocks him out cold. And that's the end of the episode. So Roger is not done. Man, he's a slave to them. He's been sold to them. He's a super journey north. It's been a couple of months. It's probably been a few weeks since he's been recaptured. He's got like a beard. His hair is longer. Somehow his clothes have been holding up real good, though. I bet he stinks really bad. And American Indians really don't appreciate body hair. They don't have much body hair. They have a lot of hair on their head generally, but not a body hair, hardly at all. It's very sparse. So body hair is seen as something that is dirty and ugly. It'll be interesting to see if that topic is tackled on the show. So Roger has just been through the ringer. We don't know what's going to happen to him. We don't know what his injuries are. But now he's into Mohawk Village life. Wow. So he's not out. He's not in the 20th. We'll see him again. So we'll see him this episode. There's only, 2 left? 2 more. So we got a lot to wrap up in 2 episodes. So Jamie and Claire. There's a great divide between them. They're barely talking. Their body language is really stiff. Jamie's not talking, just kind of sullen, and he's almost sulking. And it's just wrong. They're not connecting at all. And young Ian actually comes to Claire at one point and offers marital advice. He's like 16, but he's been through a lot, and his parents had a good marriage. And he wants Claire to go to Jamie. He thinks that she's mad at Jamie. When are you going to stop being mad at him? Well, she says, I'm not mad. She's worried about Brianna and Roger, and when you're a parent. I'm really on the fence about this. I'm really on the fence about Claire not being mad at Jamie, because it's in her history to be mad at him. Way back in season 1, when they were getting busy in the, on the Glen, and the 2 men came up, and Jamie was being held, so she ended up having to kill the other man by herself. It was the first time she killed someone. It really put her into shock, and she was very angry at him for not protecting her. It took her a long time to really be able to voice that, but she was angry. Whether it's rational or not, it doesn't matter. That was her response. So if that's her history, why would she not have some anger and distrust because of Bonnet? Even though they all bought into Bonnet, Jamie ultimately made the decision not to turn him in and to help him escape. And to have Bonnet murder a companion of theirs, take her ring, torment them, and then rape their daughter. It seems like to me that with Claire's history, that she would be angry at him, even if it was not rational. And she'd be angry at him for beating the hell out of Roger without good information and withholding it, right? So taking this turn of, I'm just worried about the children, is really, it's hard for me to digest. It's hard for me to swallow. I think that's why this podcast took me extra days this week, because I couldn't quite get my brain around it. And I finally, this afternoon, was like, okay, I can sit down and write it. I can sit down and write some extra things, and I have an idea for the podcast. But it's hard for me to do that. I think it's very weird and not based in Claire's character on the show, on how she would respond. Because just because she's older doesn't mean she's more rational. She got pissed off at Frank for all kinds of things, whether they were real or imaginary. And that's what she does. So for it to get turned around that she's just worried about the kids, well, then why isn't she talking to Jamie? Like, I don't buy the fact that she doesn't have some level of anger, distrust, something, just something that she's holding on to. But she listens to young Ian ultimately, and after they had a couple of, we see them traveling and they're camping for another time. And this is the giantest tent I've ever seen. Like, my whole family could sleep in that tent. It was so big. And Jamie's all huddled in the corner. But she goes in to talk to him. And she apologizes and tells him that she's not angry at him at all. Which I still, that doesn't ring real true to me at all. And he's been like Mr. Sulk Man. Like, I don't know, that's kind of a guy thing though, I guess. You're just going to sulk around and instead of coming and saying, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm feeling. So it's basically like she apologizes and she's just really, she tries to explain to him, this is an interesting concept, but I still don't quite buy that she's not pissed off at him. Is that she said after Frank died, it was just her and Brianna. And they were able to bond, and they really had each other, and they kept each other's secrets, pretty much, right? Even though it wasn't very long before Claire left. And because when Frank was alive, she and Frank were very close, and Claire really missed out on a lot of that. So she, now that Brianna's in the 18th with them, she doesn't quite know how to do both. She doesn't exactly know how to balance the two of them, Jamie and Brianna, because then she just had Jamie to have those intimate things with and secrets and stuff, right? And she didn't quite know how to balance it out from being a mother and a wife and have an adult child and all those things. That essentially that's what it came down to. She wasn't navigating the process very well yet. It's hard and it's new, and she's sorry for not telling him about Bonnet and yada, yada, yada. So though I found that that was really intriguing to take that perspective, because I think it's really truthful to the character, it didn't feel totally genuine to me. Because it's like she's holding on to a grain of sand between her fingers and worrying it. And that's that, can Jamie protect me? Like when he really needs to, somebody can hold him back and all hell's breaking loose. Or it could again. And these are all the consequences of Stephen Bonnet. And the consequence of Roger. And now they're having to travel for months. I mean, she totally understands why he did it. He was protecting their daughter for what he thought, right? And didn't want her rapist to come and claim her because they could in that time period. So it's interesting because she really explores that, and then Jamie really thinks that he can't be a father to Brianna, that she can't love him, and all of those things. And Claire calls him a fool, and you know, that's not the case at all, and she didn't mean what she said, and she didn't mean for him to go to hell, and just like he says things that he doesn't mean, so does Brianna, they're alike. So it was just, it felt like there was something missing in that exchange. I haven't read the script for this week, I've had a lot of other things going on, and I don't know if there was more conversation, I don't know. But it felt really anticlimactic. Maybe that's it. It felt like something was just not quite part of that conversation that really needed to be. I mean, her just apologizing for everything. I mean, he did say he was sorry too. But for what? For his part in the mess? For the things he said to Brianna? For not talking to Claire? Like, what was he really saying sorry for? So I left that a little bit befuddled, and the makeup sex it kind of reminded me of when they were camped out after they let Bonnet go. And it was just kind of like, On second watch, that seemed a little bit better when I really sat there and watched it by myself. But on the second watch of the makeup, I could see some more of the tenderness and how everything connected, but it just kind of fell short. Like you would expect, I know it's cold, but I would have expected them to take more time with each other, because the inference is that they've been traveling now for many weeks. And they haven't been talking. They may have not even been sleeping in the same tent. We don't know, but that's what it seems like. So wouldn't you think that they would, given their emotional state and that fragility that they were having, because again, they were bearing themselves to each other and saying really vulnerable things, that they would have taken some time. It would have been kind of more reconnecting. Because I know many of us have had those periods where it's been, for whatever reason in our marriages, where there have been pretty serious dry spells of intimacy. And they're really hard. And to really reconnect from those, there has to be that sense of openness, and it's scary when it's been a while. And maybe that's what was missing from that part of this whole conversation. The sex part was that communication, that sexual communication, and that kind of reintegration with each other just fell flat to me. It just seemed like, okay, no foreplay, no warm-up. I'm just going to, after all this time of us not being intimate, barely talking to each other, certainly not touching each other, that she's just going to be riding ready. I don't know. I was like, oh, it was a little disappointing. And it didn't even seem very passionate. And it didn't have the caution of reintegrating that intimate part of your relationship. So, I don't know. I was like, meh. I was kind of disappointed in it, truthfully. I know a lot of other people were too. They're really hoping that kind of reclaiming of the intimate part of their relationship would really shine. And it didn't. So the next thing is A Man Needs a Purpose. Wow, this podcast is going to be long. Where we see Fergus and his plight, and his wife knows best. And this was kind of a weird, let's just throw this in. Since Murtaugh is like hanging with Marsali and Fergus at their really nice apartment, by the way, that Fergus can't get a job. Nobody respects him. He only has one hand. I don't know what happened, but the dude had a job at the newspaper shop when Fergus ran into Roger. They didn't know each other, but when Roger was looking for Brianna, like Fergus was doing inventory there, like, what happened to that job? He get fired? That's weird. Just so weird. Like, it was just kind of random. And of course they made the best of it because Marsali is awesome. And she told Murtaugh, hey, I don't care. If you're going to fight with the regulators, have Fergus join you. Ask him to join you. She said he'd rather have a dead man that was whole, than half a man, basically. So Marsali's awesome, and she really does want the best for her husband and her family. Ultimately, Fergus turns it down, but it really gave him that lift that he's not less than, that he has something to contribute. But he did go and get the 411 on, it's the 411 episode, on when Stephen Bonnet was coming back into town. He got the information, and they were able to act on it and catch Stephen Bonnet. Man, Ed Spaliers is awesome. But then, because it can't go according to plan, in broad daylight, when you knock a man out and you're dragging him in the street, maybe local law is going to find you, because Murtaugh is the face of the regulators. He ends up getting arrested. Fergus, gets away because Murtaugh, smacks him to make it look like he's assaulting, like he's assaulted both of these men. And then Stephen Bonnet gets taken to jail as well because they recognize who he is. So they get 2 birds with 1 stone. And I already covered the Murtaugh the Wanted. He still fits in here real weird, but it's working. That's how it goes. And then Lizzie the Loudmouth is my very last one. And I put that she's judgmental, she's irresponsible with her words, and she's loyal. So she panicked when she saw Brianna's art therapy. They weren't calling it that. Brianna was just processing, and she was doing a very good job, and we saw lots and lots of her sketches of life at River Run. So they've been there a while with the amount that she'd been sketching. But Lizzie, freaks out and thinks that Brianna's possessed. If you could see my face right now, I totally eye rolled hard. Brianna says, no, this is just showing how I feel. My anger and this, that, and the other. So good for Brianna. Lizzie apologizes, and Brianna accepts it, and she's not upset her at all. It's interesting. So is that the protective nature of Brianna, who thinks that she's just a silly young girl of 16? And so it's okay? I don't know. I even though Lizzie was working with what she knew, and the only one who's truly accountable for all this stuff is Bonnet, because he retained Roger and all the things, right? Is the fact that everybody not communicating well is really at the heart of it, even though Bonnet's actions were he's the one who's fully responsible. Everybody else plays a part in it as well. Lizzie's irresponsible with her words. As soon as Brianna swoons and ends up on the parlor couch, she's like, I was so worried and in your condition. And that's where she's like, yeah, I'm pregnant. To Lord John, cat's out of the bag. Lizzie, oh my gosh, this was supposed to be one of her potential suitors. Even if they could tell she was pregnant, it was supposed to be hush hush, even though everybody knew about it. Again, she's the prized fertile pig. But ultimately, Lizzie is really loyal. She went to get Lord John. She still helps Brianna with anything that she needs. And she is going to be, even if she steps over her tongue and she puts her foot in her mouth and she says stupid stuff. I'm not really enjoying Lizzie very much. It'll be interesting to see how they flesh out her character in the future. But she just kind of is what she is at this point. So my final thoughts are, I wanted to love this episode. And I loved things about it. All the River Run stuff, really good. Overall, so well done. The Jamie and Claire makeup seemed okay, but not as impactful as desired. The Fergus subplot is bizarre. Again, since he had a job and Roger ran into him at the newspaper shop. And I'm glad that something is happening with the Murtaugh storyline that makes sense. He's going to jail and Stephen Bonnet's going to jail. Because we saw in the preview, it looks like Brianna's going to go and see Stephen Bonnet in jail. Because she's not far from Wilmington. So that's interesting. I'm hoping that Claire and Jamie reach that Mohawk village in this next episode. It was really difficult to track time there, except for the wealth of Brianna's sketches and being told it was 2 months travel north to the Mohawk village and looking at Roger's facial hair and regular hair, it was very difficult to actually track the time and to see what was happening. And having some more of that would have been really helpful, because they're basically going to be gone for 2.5 months? Just travel to the village? So that's like 5 months round trip. That's a long time to be gone. And Brianna is starting to show with her cute little fake baby. That'll be interesting. So we're going to be seeing more Lord John then, if Brianna's at River Run, and they're supposed to be betrothed. So I'm looking forward to that. And I wonder how they're going to resolve the Mohawk adopt people into their tribe, because when they lose people, they adopt new people in and make them Mohawk. They're no longer white. They have to speak the Mohawk language. And so what's going to happen? If they take Roger back, well, he's theirs. He's part of their tribe, slave or not. So somebody's going to have to be replaced. Or he's going to have to be replaced with someone. Jeez. My tongue. Okay, so that about wraps this up. I really am excited to see what happens in these next 2 episodes. I am not sad the season is ending. There's been a lot. And I think now that a really big book has been adapted, Fiery Cross will be adapted well. I think there's a lot of improvements this season that I've seen. And I hope Fiery Cross is even better. A good portion of the first section of the book can be condensed into 1 episode. We can see everything. That's a good thing about the visual medium. So, again, I can't wait for the read-along to start. And it's going to be a ride. It's going to be a good time. So I will put the comments that I received this week into next week's podcast. I will combine them both because this podcast is going a little extra long right now. But I wanted to thank the listeners who have given single contributions. Recently, Arlene and Laura. It makes a world of difference. And I have an idea what I'm going to do with your contribution. Something fun. And also, there is going to be a fantastic giveaway coming up, so stay tuned. I'm going to have it to give away to celebrate the ending of the season for the season finale. And pay attention. You'll hear it on the podcast. It'll be on the website. You'll see it on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you will learn the ways to enter. So make sure that you follow on Twitter and Instagram at Dram of Outlander. On Facebook, on the group, it's a Dram of Outlander group. The page is a Dram of Outlander. The website is a dramofoutlander.com. Are you sensing a theme here? Email me with your comments, questions, thoughts to tell me to piss off. I don't care. Your criticisms are fine by me. I can handle it. Contact at a dramofoutlander.com or 719-425-9444 is the voice line. Please leave me a message, and your comments could be put into a future podcast. I thank you. So again, patreon.com/a Dram of Outlander if you want to offer a monthly support. If you want to do a one-time offering, email, leave a voicemail, Find me on Facebook. It's all good. And I appreciate you guys so much because it really does help. Because I do have to do some upgrades and maintenance here. And just like as every week, I thank you for coming back and listening and helping me grow the podcast. So please share it with other people. Have people come to the social media sites. Join into the discussions that go on. They're amazing. They're amazing. And again, I just want to thank you guys. For those of you who do participate on social media, especially in the Facebook group, you are awesome. And you are so conscious of being kind to each other almost always and respectful, even when none of us agree. Like some people love X, Y, and Z, and other of us are like, I didn't like that at all. It didn't make sense. I mean, again, we filter all of the experience of the show through our own life, through our own lens, through our own philosophy, through all the things that we've gone through in life. And so for something, they're doing something right to have so many people really connect to it on many different levels. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we're going to take away from it what we each want to take away from. So to me, it's so fun to step back and look at it. And very few shows would I do this with at all. This one is totally worth doing it over. It's really awesome. It really is. Even when I have critiques and criticisms, it's really good. And I'm okay with the different verse, with familiar people. And again, we always have the books to go back to, and that's our own pictures in our own mind. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic next days ahead before episode 412. And just thank you for being here with me. Bye-bye. Until next time, Slán Java.